Hi, my name's C. Steele from LTONICS, and at the IATEFL conference this year in Brighton, I was invited by the YLT and LitSIGs to present at their pre-conference event. Thank you so much to both SIGs for inviting me, and here is the session if you couldn't make it. Now, in the conference event, we had a big room, and I got the participants to stand up and move to the side of the room that best describes them. But because we're on video here, perhaps you can just think, and with a little bit of imagination, think, are you a bird or a fish? Why? Are you moon or a sun? Why? And are you a boy or a girl? Why? So, when you made a decision to be the sun or the moon or a bird or fish, you perhaps thought about your values, your beliefs, your personality traits, essentially who you really are. When asked why, with a bit of imagination, I'm sure you could probably easily answer and probably enjoyed answering too. I think the decision was easier or quicker to answer if you were a boy or a girl, but maybe harder to answer why. Maybe these questions will help. Is it because you were told by your caregivers and doctors? Is it because you played with boys' toys or girls' toys? Maybe you like dressing in certain clothes that are considered more male or female. Is it because you don't even have to think about it? You are what you are, and that's okay. Or perhaps society only gave you two choices, she, her, he, him, and that's absolutely fine, and you agree with that even. It's a tough question to answer. Welcome to my world. I'm non binary, and I'm often asked why. Before I continue, I'd just like to say that I'm going to share my story and how I identify. Every non binary person has a different story, and so I'm not speaking for all non binary people. It's a recent journey for me and continues to be. Now, the fact that you had to choose one or the other also relates to my experience. Let me share a little bit more about me. I was assigned female at birth, and my mum was delighted I was a girl because she already had a boy. I played with boys' toys mostly. I had a big remote toy truck and I played football a lot. I liked boys' clothes the most. And then I had to wear a girl's uniform because I went to an all girls school. I am who I am, but it isn't always understood as being okay. And my upbringing was that I had to be a boy or a girl. And this is the gender binary view in society that I've battled with my entire life. Now, there are many reasons why I chose the book I'm about to show you. It's about a child who can't decide who they are in a binary world that they're born into. It cleverly pushes against conformity and the boundaries and binaries that we all live. Let's have a look at the front page of From the Stars in the Sky to the Fish in the Sea. and see how this book doesn't conform. Let's look at the picture book cover itself. What or questions does it evoke? For example, boy or girl, the character that we see. Is this character human or an animal? A bird or a deer? And then, are we in the sky or the sea here? We can see the stars and we can see the fish. Other ways this book doesn't conform is that there are no capital letters in the title or story, only the character's name, which is Mulan, and the pronoun used for Mulan are they, them. Mulan is considered a gender neutral name. Let's take a minute to reflect on the power of language. Now, we all know this as language educators, but what does it mean for transgender and gender creative people? This is Benjamin Lee Hicks. They're a visual artist, elementary school teacher, and teacher educator. And they say, my own trans body remembers the depth of tiredness that comes from not understanding how to speak. I remember the futility of trying to splice together fragments of a language that was too limited to tell the story of myself to anyone, including myself. As a child, this took up so much of my own substance that wanting to disappear felt not only natural, but also easy, expected, and right. It has taken a long time to learn that the standards of language were not constructed to include those of us who exist in the in-between, and even longer to understand that this is not something we need to be ashamed of. This is me, moody, grumpy sea. I think I'm around 8 years old here, and I loved football. And I had a male friend, and we used to play football all the time together. And we happened to go to the same primary school as well. And at that primary school, there was a boys' football team. And my friend was in that football team. And I really wanted to be in that football team. So luckily, my friend had the power of persuasion, and he convinced that the team should allow me, the boys' football team should allow me to have a trial run, see how good I was. And so it happened. And I started to play in the boys' football team, and I think I even scored a couple of goals, and I was doing really well. And I don't know about your experience, but in my primary school, because there was a lack of space, we had different white lines on the pitch. There was the football pitch, white lines, and there was the rugby pitch, and there were tennis courts, and they all had different lines. And while we were playing this game of football, the ball rolled over one of these white lines, and I picked it up to throw it in. And the boy said, no, you can't pick it up. It's not out. And I'd obviously got those lines mixed up. It was from some other game in a court or another pitch. And at that moment, the boys said to me, you're a girl, you can't be in the boys' team. That was it. That every chance I had was over at that moment. So unfair. But from, from that experience, I knew then that there was a separation of boys and girls that I just didn't understand. I don't think for 1 minute that if you're a cisgender female and you play football that you're automatically non-binary. That's not what I'm saying. It was just a moment when I thought, okay, there's this and that. I then played families and elastics with the girls after that, and then I went to an all-girls secondary school. It was only until I studied fine art at university that I came out as gay. But still, I couldn't find the language of my in-between existence. It just didn't exist for me at that time. So let's look at some of the language that I wish I had when I was growing up. So we have non-binary, it's an adjective, so non-binary person or MB. Other ways to describe non-binary people or how non-binary people identify or choose to describe themselves are gender queer, gender fluid, gender flux, gender non-conforming, and gender creative. And this means gender identity or gender expression. It's that which falls outside the binary gender categories of man and woman. Now, some non-binary people consider themselves part of the transgender community, some don't. Transgender is their gender differs from the sex they were assigned at birth. So the term can also describe their gender more specifically: transgender man, transgender woman. Other specific ways people are non-binary: agender, bigender, demigender, and pangender. We also have gender neutral pronouns, mine are they, them. And don't ask what someone's preferred pronouns are, just ask what pronouns they use. Benjamin Lee Hicks continues to say, when the things we say and do in our classrooms depend entirely on binaries and absolutes, we're actively supporting the privilege of some students at the expense of the life force of others. If we are first taught that this system is all hard edges, sharp corners, and absolute rules, we are simultaneously ingesting a message that there are distinct limits around what the mind is capable of conceiving and creating, around what an individual can possibly do and be and become. With this in mind, let's read our book, From the Stars in the Sky to the Fish in the Sea. Once upon a time, in a little blue house on a hill on the edge of town, a baby was born. They were born when both the moon and the sun were in the sky, so the baby couldn't decide what to be. Boy or girl, bird or fish, cat or rabbit, tree or star. So the baby looked a little like everything. They looked very strange. All the same, the baby's mother gave her child a bath and rocked them in her arms. Your name, she said, is Mulan. And she sang a song that her own mother had sung to her long ago. Whatever you dream of, I believe you can be, from the stars in the sky to the fish in the sea. You can crawl like a crab or with feathers fly high, and I'll always be here. I'll be near, standing by, and you know that I'll love you to the day that I die. And even though they still couldn't decide, the baby felt loved. Mulan grew up to be a strange, magical child who was always changing. They grew feathers and wings to fly, with bluebirds in the mornings, scales and tail to swim with fish in the afternoons, and fur and paws to play with puppies in the evenings. No matter how many things Mulan became, their mother always brought them back into the little blue house, gave them a bath, and tucked them into bed at day's end. As the stars rose, she sang, "Whatever you dream of, I believe you can be, from the stars in the sky to the fish in the sea." And Mulan felt loved. Look at the little pink pet here. This little thing comes into nearly every page. One day it was time for the child to go to school. Uh-oh. They were so excited. They grew a tail of peacock feathers and a coat of tiger stripes. "Have fun," said Mulan's mother. But when they got to school, the other students were either boys or girls. They had no feathers, no scales, no leaves, no fur, no fins, not even any sparkles. No one invited Mulan to play. One little boy ran up to the child and asked, "What are you supposed to be?" Mulan didn't know how to answer. When they came home, their mother asked them how they'd liked school. "It's okay," said Mulan. "Did you make any friends?" "Not really," said Mulan. That night, Mulan's mother tucked them into bed and sang, "You can crawl like a crab, or with feathers fly high, and I'll always be here. I'll be near, standing by. And you know that I'll love you to the day that I die." And Mulan felt loved, but also worried. The next day they wore a turtle shell and porcupine spines. No one pulled or poked Mulan, but the other children still pointed and whispered. "Did you make any friends today?" asked their mother. "Not really," said Mulan. That night, Mulan's mother tucked them into bed and sang, "Whatever you dream of, I believe you can be, from the stars in the sky to the fish in the sea." And Mulan felt loved, but they also felt sad. The next day, Mulan wore no feathers, no scales, no leaves, no fur, no fins, no shells, no spines, not even any sparkles. Mulan was invited to play baseball with the boys. No one pointed, whispered, laughed, or stared. But when Mulan joined the little girls playing hopscotch, "Boys don't play hopscotch," said a little girl. "Are you a boy or a girl anyway?" asked a little boy. "Didn't you have a shell the other day?" asked a little girl, "and feathers the day before? What are you supposed to be?" said several children all at once. "I don't know," Mulan shouted, and galloped out the playground on horse's hooves, swam through the stream with a fish's tail, and soared up the hill on an eagle's wings. "How was school?" asked Mulan's mother. "I wore feathers and stripes so that the other kids would think I was beautiful, but they thought I was weird. And then I wore a shell and spines so that no one would pull or poke me, but then they wouldn't talk to me. And then I tried to just be like everyone else, but I haven't made any friends. I can't decide what to be. Why do I have to be just one thing?" Their mother smiled sadly. "I don't know," she admitted. "But I do know this. Whatever you dream of, I believe you can be, from the stars in the sky to the fish in the sea." And Mulan felt loved. That night, they slept a deep sleep. The next day, Mulan wore fur, feathers, scales, leaves, and many sparkles that glittered like stars. For a moment, none of the other children spoke. Then a little girl said, "You can fly? That's so cool." "I like your sparkles," said a little boy. "I'm sorry I pulled your feathers," said the boy with red hair. "I was just jealous of them." Mulan asked, "Does anyone want to play with me?" They showed the other children how to gallop like horses, climb like monkeys, and swim like fish. It was fun to be many different things. And the child of fur, feathers, scales, leaves, and sparkles, who was neither boy nor girl, but many things and always changing, felt happy. In the little blue house on the hill on the edge of town, Mulan's mother smiled and sang the song her mother had sung to her once upon a time. Whatever you dream of, I believe you can be. From the stars in the sky to the fish in the sea, you can crawl like a crab or with feathers fly high, and I'll always be here. I'll be near, standing by. And you know that I'll love you to the day that I die. Whatever you dream of, I believe you can be, for you are my child, courageous and free. From here, we could give this activity to the children to do in pairs or in groups. They look at these animals and they decide what they're called and what features these animals have. We've seen these in the picture book I've just read. So, for example, we have an eagle with wings, feathers, claws. We have a peacock with feathers, a crab with claws or pincers, a puppy with fur and paws, a horse with hooves, a porcupine with spikes or quills, a tiger with stripes, a monkey with a big long tail, a turtle with shell or flippers, and a fish with scales. We can then ask the children to find them in what Mulan is wearing at different stages of the book. I can see some paws and some spikes and some feathers. From here, would perhaps have the children together in a circle. We'd have a little class discussion together. And in no particular order, and we would kind of build on what the children are saying and responding to as well. We might ask these questions. And perhaps you would like to pause the video and think for yourself your answers to these questions. Most me. What do you think this means? Who gets to decide what is most you? Why do you think this is? Do people tell you who you're supposed to be? What does this feel like? I then get the children to choose 3 animals from our picture book that is most them. And then they think, why do they represent them? For example, we give them these animals here, they get to choose 3 of them. And for example, here are mine. Because I'm a little bit cheeky, what do we think that animal is? A monkey. Because I can be fiercely loyal? A tiger. And because I have always tried to live my life being free and not conforming? An eagle. And notice that I didn't say because I like or because I love. I'm actually really describing why these animals represent me or symbolize me in some way. So the children do this, they share their animals together and their reasons why they represent them. I then give them this little picture of Mulan, and they basically create their own identity costume based on the three animals that they chose. So here's mine with my eagle, my tiger, and my monkey. Now, this visual, creative gender expression is actually really important for me and other non binary people. The article that you see here on the screen, this measured how much effort and a non binary individual puts into their gender expression. It also looks at the motives behind gender expression to cope with minority stress as well. And here are what some of the participants in this research said about their creative gender expression. My creative gender expression makes me feel human, full, and real. My gender expression helps me feel comfortable in my gender identity. I make my look or style noticeable in a way for people to be able to look at something I would consider my brand and think of me. The freedom and peace that comes with being authentically me is sometimes worth all the pain and hardship I've gone through to get here. Now, I relate to this a lot. And here is my experience on a daily basis. When I go to the bathroom, I'm female. When I meet people on the street, I'm either male or female. When I travel, I'm female in my passport. In Portuguese and Spanish, the two languages outside of English that I use, I'm female. On my marriage certificate, on my visa, on my mortgage, I'm female. When I visit the doctor or the dentist, I'm female. I have these three things that help me. The way I present, so hair has always been a big thing for me, clothes, and the pronouns I use, they, them, and my allies. And this is a big shout out to my colleagues and friends who have always had my back on this journey, and to my amazingly beautiful partner. But I always carry the burden of relying on other people's open mindedness, the language they use or not used to using, and perhaps them questioning their own beliefs. Butler says individual agency is bound up with social critique and social transformation. One only determines one's own sense of gender to the extent that social norms exist to support and enable that act of claiming gender for oneself. One is dependent on this outside to lay claim to what is one's own. It is only through the experience of recognition that any of us becomes constituted as socially viable human beings. In other words, she's saying we are unable to be us unless society accepts us as us. So let's recognize and celebrate who we are and the differences we all have in class. I get the students to think back to their descriptions of themselves on the Mulan costumes and they write words on pieces of paper that I give them. For example, a little cheeky, fiercely loyal, non-conforming and free were mine when I was describing monkey, tiger and eagle. From here, the students put their little pieces of paper in the center of the table and they're working in groups. So now they write one positive description or something they know about each member of the group on a piece of paper and they add these words to the center of the table. I then get the students to create a free-form poem to celebrate who we are. So they have all of these words in the center of the table and they can place these words anywhere in the poem. They can add more words, for example, nouns, prepositions, linking words, and start some lines with we are. It's good to include words such as together and all. And it perhaps might look something like this. This was adapted from Beyond This or That, challenging the limits of binary language in elementary education through poetry, word art, and creative bookmaking by Benjamin Lee Hicks. We could then get the students to get up and look at other people's poems and see the similarities and differences. In summary, identity is more than gender. It is many things. It's all sides of the room. It's all the animals. It's all the adjectives. It's all the words you choose, all the people we are. However, some are accepted and some aren't. Some are considered to go against the norm and are marginalised and judged. We owe our children the right to be who they are. We owe them the right to experiment and find out who they are and change their minds and it be okay. Instead of including singular identities in our classrooms, we should celebrate who we all are because we are all different and all part of society. And Sarah and I, LTonics, we talked at YLTSIG Brighton with this talk, Stop Including Us, Arguments Against Inclusion and for Diversity. And we go into this a lot more. We also have this recorded on our YouTube channel for you to listen to as well. It just leaves us to reflect now. What have you sailed away with from this session? Here are the wonderful resources that I referred to in this session. And this just leaves me to say thank you for listening. And by the way, I still play football really well.